Hello and welcome to Viewpoint on Ukraine today. I'm Tamara Rosevan. In the studio, we're discussing Ukraine's investment climate, economic growth for this year, and privatization of state-owned enterprises. Joining us in our studio is Oleh Ustenko. He's the executive director of the Bleyzer Foundation.
Hello.
Welcome to Viewpoint.
Thank you.
So Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk recently called on U.S. Businesses to invest and buy state-owned enterprises in Ukraine. Now, is this a good idea?
I absolutely sure that this is a good idea. First of all, by privatization, we are able to cover the fiscal deficit which the country is going to have this year. I just want to remind you that this year fiscal deficit is going to be on the level of 3.7% to GDP, which is, a substantial improvement compared with the previous year. Just to remind you that last year the deficit was on the level of around 9% of GDP, and the year before it was on the level of 12% of GDP, which was extremely high. So basically what happened, the government was able to decrease the level of deficit, and it's absolutely sure that somehow you have to finance this deficit. And one of the ways to finance this deficit is do privatization. Of course, somebody can argue that the privatization is not, sustainable way of financing deficit, and I agree with that. But what will happen after we privatize Ukrainian companies? First of all, it's not that we are just able to finance the deficit. There is a second issue, and this second issue, in my mind, is even more important. And this second issue and second reason is due to the fact that at least we will stop subsidizing these state-owned companies. So basically, we are able to decide two extremely important goals. A little bit decrease of fiscal deficit this year, and then we are saving the money for the Ukrainian taxpayers in the future.
Now, I want to stop you there. Ukraine's anti-corruption bureau head, Artem Sitnik, recently said that state-owned enterprises are being undervalued. In fact, that this is a big problem because of corruption within the system, I suppose. So what steps should the government take in order to stem this?
Look, I am absolutely sure that the government is not an effective owner, especially when we are talking about real businesses, about companies. And if you take any Ukrainian state-owned company, you'll see that the effectiveness of this company is going to be much, much lower if you compare the results of this company with the private sector companies working in the same field. So basically, for me, it's first of all the issue related to inefficiency of state-owned companies. And for me, it's also the issue that if you continue to keep these companies under the state umbrella, you are going to lose more and more and more. Please keep in mind that Ukraine is the country where you have a high level of corruption. Remember these latest ratings of Transparency International, German-based think tank. They are saying that Ukraine is again, at the very end of the list of the most corrupted countries in the world. So, and this corruption is also due to the fact that you still have a huge role of the government, of state, in the businesses. So my position is whatever you can privatize, you do privatize now. And I do not buy any arguments related to the point that, look, you'd better not do it now, because if you privatize now, the prices of assets are on a lower level, which is probably true. But what are you expecting? You are expecting that it's going to be...
But some of the main industries like coal, electricity, military equipment, for example, gas, should the government keep some control or absolute control of these industries?
Look, in my view, the best way for the government is privatize whatever is possible. Whatever is possible. I do not care. Are we talking about...
And what are your three reasons for that, then?
Huge inefficiency in each state-owned company. So if you want to increase efficiency, do privatization. The second issue is that everything related to corruption, if you want to reduce corruption here, part of this game is also to get out, to get rid of all these state-owned companies. And the third one is that you still need foreign direct investments into the country. And you have to start from something. And please start from privatization. And this privatization will be a signal for further steps which the country has to undertake in order to improve the quality of investment climate. Look, if you compare what happened last year Ukraine was able to receive only $1 billion in foreign direct investments. And compare these numbers, for example, with let's say 5 years before. 5 years before, the country was able to receive on a level 6-7 billion. It was still very low.
Wasn't that money, most of it coming from Russia?
I would say that 80%, by the way, 80% of this money was coming from, at that time, if you compare, if it's a question about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the 80% of the money of foreign direct investments, which we were receiving here in this country, were coming from the side of Cyprus, but which is offshore zone.
Right.
Then there was a change in the legislation, and after that, let's say 3 years ago or 2 years ago, Ukraine was able to receive 80% of its FDI's inflow from the territory of British Virgin Islands, so in another offshore zone. But you are right.
Are these transparent? But are they transparent, some of these transactions that Ukraine is getting? Like you've mentioned the Cyprus and...
Look, there are a lot of speculations, of course, and I do believe that it might be true that the largest part of this money we were receiving, and we were receiving even last year, were coming from the side of the Russian Federation, but also they were coming from the side of Ukrainian oligarchs, who at some point just were able to earn this money here. Somehow they transferred this money abroad, overseas, and eventually they decided to take this money back to Ukraine. But look, not all money are invested in Ukraine, even if they were earned here by Russians or Ukrainians who were operating on this market. Because all these investors, even, Russian or Ukrainian investors, they think as any other international investor. They have a menu of the countries. They have a choice. Either they are investing into Ukraine, or they can invest and take their money and invest to Poland, or they can go to UK, or they can go to the States, or they can do the same investment in China.
So how does Ukraine make itself attractive to foreign investors? For example, recently, the IMF former head, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, joined the board of a bank owned by Ukrainian billionaire Viktor Pinchuk. Now, will that be attractive, potentially, for foreign investments? How do you think this will affect, potentially?
I would say that it will add, but add just, really a little bit. I would say that to change the situation you have, in order to make Ukraine more attractive for other businesses, you have to change the situation. And look, you have to also think in terms of the broader context.
But just to stop you there, Strauss-Kahn has been embroiled in a huge scandal where he was accused of rape in the U.S. And now he'll be working for a major bank here in Ukraine. Now, that will probably affect some sort of investment. Do you think?
I mean, you think that it's going to be, a bad thing, or it's going to be a good thing? I didn't get from...
Well, I would like to know your opinion. How do you think this will affect?
I would say that, in my opinion, it will not affect the investment climate in the country overall at all. Look, if we are talking about the broader context, look, the economy, the world economy is slowing down, and it's very clear. Look, China is slowing down. They will not be able to show that tremendous growth that they used to show in the past. It's very likely that they will be growing this year at a level of 6.5 or between this number. What happened on the other continent? Look at South America. Brazil is going to decrease. Venezuela is going to decrease. Argentina is going to show a significant decline. Investors feel that the situation on so-called emerging markets is not that good as it used to be in the past.
And is Ukraine part of that emerging market?
Exactly. And Ukraine, the part of these emerging markets. So basically what will happen, these investors feel that the situation on emerging market including Ukraine, is not good, is not that attractive as it used to be in the past. They're trying to find a better place, not risky place for themselves. So they will be rather investing into some European countries, or let's say in Canada or in the United States of America. So they will be withdrawing their capital, or if not, if they are not going to withdraw their capital, they will invest into these part of the world, including Ukraine, much lower numbers. At the same time, if these countries feel themselves not that good as they used to feel themselves in the past, they will be needed more investments. So as a result, you have less supply of investments on one hand. On the other hand, the demand of this investment is going to increase dramatically. The competition is going to increase, times. So basically, the only country will be able to win this competition, meaning to get these extra investments or foreign direct investments at all, who is able to show better investment conditions. And these better investment conditions include everything. Low level of corruption, which is definitely not Ukraine now. And that's why
Ukraine is working on several reforms to become more attractive in that sense.
Absolutely. That's why the agenda for Ukrainian government now, for Ukrainian parliament, for Ukrainian authorities, for Ukrainian president, is try to deal with corruption. Another issue in Ukraine is the judicial system reform. Who is going to invest in the country where, for example, Ukraine compared with Poland, if you compare, the rule of law in the countries? If that country is going to attract more investment, which is able to supply to investor or to show to investor that it really has, decent level of, or at least they have a rule of law. So basically, that's why in political agenda for Ukrainian authorities is to introduce judicial system reform.
And implement reforms, of course. A very, very, very interesting discussion today. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having me here.
This has been Oleh Ustenko. He's the executive director of the Bleyzer Foundation. You've been watching Viewpoint on Ukraine Today.